Swayam Prabha. Digital India. Educated India.
Welcome to Module I, Lecture 8. In this lecture, we shall discuss about the speed management measures. In Lecture 7, I mentioned to you about the road safety countermeasures, why we need to focus on evidence based approach, which are the interventions found to work well and which did not work so well as per the evidence, and then what are the interventions under safe road or safe infrastructure, speed management or safe speed, and then the safe road users. Then took also two case studies, one with reference to use of flexible poles on curves with restricted side distance, and the other one is related to the use of transverse bar markings near built up area. With this background, today we shall discuss about the speed management measures. Why we are saying that it is important to focus on speeding? The very fundamental question which we should get convinced with the answers, and we should believe from the core of our heart that yes, it is important. What are the reasons? First, speeding is a major cause of crashes. If you see the data in Indian context, I have shown many data in the beginning in the introductory lecture on this module. First lecture on this module I, 71% of total crashes, more than that, and more than 67% of the fatalities, the reason is speeding as per the data record. That means, speed is a major contributing factor in more than 70% of the crashes and more than 2/3 of the fatalities. This itself could be the argument good enough to justify why we need to focus on speeding. Over and above, scientific evidences clearly indicate higher the impact speed, higher is the risk of fatality. I am showing you the graph, very interesting. You can see when a pedestrian is hit by a car, when a vehicle is hitting an object, when side impact or side crash is happening, when head on collision is happening on undivided road, then at different speeds starting from very low to high, as the speed increases, how the fatality risk in a scale of 0 to 100%, how it changes. Obviously, lower the speed, lower is the fatality risk, and you are increasing the speed, you are increasing the risk of fatality. So, if we have to control fatality, if we have to bring down the fatality, we have to do proper speed management, focus on speed. Increase in average speed just by 1 kilometer on an average, increase the risk of crash by 3% per kilometer increase. 3% increase is happening, involving injury, and 4 to 5% increase of fatal crashes. How? That is what the risk. is increasing, getting influenced. Whatever is my speed limit now, if I increase it compared to my present thing, my risk will be 3% higher, involving injury, crash involving injury, and 4 to 5% increase in fatal crashes. Now, typically a car occupant involved in a crash with an impact speed of 80 km per hour, which again does not sound to be very unrealistic to you, because 80 km speed in terms of the speed value I am saying, you feel like yes, it is common with our new highway development and so. But remember, always the environment is road environment, traffic environment is not even favorable for this 80 km, because the likelihood of death is 20 times higher as compared to the impact speed of 30 km per hour. That means, if a car occupant is involved in a crash and the speed of the car is 30 km per hour, then instead of 30, if it is 80 km per hour, the likelihood of death will be 20 times higher. It does not mean that everywhere we will be at 30 km per hour. No, that is not the intention. But what we are trying to say, we must realize the evidences, scientific basis, scientific findings, why it is so, what is the human injury tolerance, and how all these things are coming. So, it only says wherever it is necessary, where the likelihood of crash is high, where the likelihood of fatality is high, speed is an instrument for us. We can control the speed. If we reduce the speed, our risk of fatality will come down distinctly. Also, higher speed narrows the field of vision. I have shown it here, and you are also familiar to this figure. I have shown it earlier in the beginning, when I talked about the various drivers characteristics and how these characteristics are linked to road safety. So, higher the speed, as the speed is increasing, you can see here this is 0, 30 km per hour, 80 km per hour, 100 km per hour, the angle is changing 120 degree to 80 degree to 30 degree to 20 degree. So, it matters, because if you say Indian roads, many cases the road is passing through busy area, might be children are crossing, might be a bicyclist came in between, a pedestrian is trying to cross the road. So, a driver has to be vigilant. So, field of vision will be better if the speed is little lower. These are the benefit. Again, does not mean that we do not need high speed facility. We can develop high speed facility, we should develop high speed facility, but not at the cost of safety. So, wherever situation is favorable, we can go for higher speed. Where such kind of land use is not there, a road is passing through an area where no roadside development exists and no such possibilities is there, or the complete access control is there, you do not have to think probably about the field of vision, may not be necessary. Next very important point, why we should focus on speeding. Higher speed increases the stopping sight distance. I have shown it here that if the distance is like this, then at different speeds based on the initial speed, how the situation may change. If the vehicle is travelling at 30 km, 40 km per hour or so, nothing will happen to this boy, nothing is going to happen. Maybe 50 km the boy will be hit by the vehicle at a speed of 29 km per hour. But if the speed is even higher, the stopping sight distance will increase the distance to stop will increase. So, at 60 the speed will be 52 kilometer per hour, the vehicle may go and hit the boy. It may be 69 if the speed is 70 and if the speed is 80, it will in the perception reaction time itself it will go and hit. The blue one is the time required for perception reaction and this is the braking one, the yellow one. So, within perception reaction time itself it will go and hit probably. So, in a heterogeneous traffic, exceeding the speed limit by a seemingly consequential 10 kilometer per hour can not only significantly increase the risk of crash, but also endanger the life of other road users. And this is schematic. All of us we know it that SST, stopping sight distance, depend on the speed, but the consequence on safety, the consequence on fatality, just see, it comes out very clearly. Next, very important point. We have tremendous physical and fiscal constraints in countries like India and also in general the LMICs, the low and medium income countries. If you consider India, high population density in many areas, take West Bengal as a state, the population density is so high, you will not get even a 10-15 kilometer stretch of highway, probably very difficult to get such sections where there is no activities. Villages are there, people are living there, activities are there. So much high population density, getting land is a major issue. We do not get the land. You may have money, but you do not have you may have the fund, but you may not have the land. Getting the land is even more difficult than getting the financial resource for the project. You can borrow, the government can borrow, the road authority can borrow, but physically the land is not available. So, many cases the footpaths, the vehicular underpass, the pedestrian underpass could not be the other kinds of facilities could not be developed because simply land is not available. Even many cases I know the foot-over bridge also could not be constructed simply because the land is not there. The land availability is an issue. There is significant roadside development, mix of traffic with slow moving, fast moving together, lack of lane disciplines. We have never taught our drivers how to drive on multi-lane highways, how to select lane. There are reasons, but look at the reality. People do not know how to use, there are multi-lane roads, if 2 or 3 lanes are there, how one should drive. You will find a slow moving vehicle taking the rightmost lane in our Indian condition, which is the supposed to be for the fastest vehicle or supposed to be used only for overtaking, very comfortably continuously travelling taking the rightmost lane. A slow moving vehicle, maybe sometimes the vehicle cannot travel more than 40-50 kilometer per hour speed. Vehicle capability wise itself the restriction is there. Slow and unauthorized motor vehicle, sometimes look at this vehicle, locally manufactured and modified vehicle, not as per the standard, carrying passengers in a very dangerous manner. But these are the realities. Also economical issues, roadside markets are there, involvement of people are there, right. There are many other issues linked. So, all these clearly show that within such deficiencies our driver education is low, because we have not trained the driver the way we are thinking now. Earlier it has been more like employment generation. So, okay, little bit of skill give them, Complexity was also not that high, but now the complexity is there, but we cannot take out all these drivers from our present system. Huge number of drivers are there, it takes time. Population density, land issue, mix of traffic, lack of lane discipline, mix of slow and fast moving vehicle. Can we change the things overnight? No. It takes much longer time to make such changes and remove the bottlenecks. So, as per scientific evidences, as per that major cause is speeding, higher the speed, higher the fatality. SST speeding narrows down the field of vision. Higher the speed, higher will be the SST, the chance of hitting or fatality will also be high, and we have so many physical and physical constraints. So, the only way is, if we want to still reduce the speed, we have to go for the speed management and focus on speeding. That is the way out. If we want to improve our performance, if we want to reduce fatality and severe injury, we have to focus on speed. There are several factors which affect the speed: driver related factors, vehicle related factor, road related factor, traffic related factor, environment related factor. I am not going into details, you can see. So, these are all the factors which decides the speed what the driver is using for travel. What is speed management? It is a large set of measures for balancing safety and efficiency of vehicle speed on a network. And speed management does not include only the deciding the speed limit. No, this is one of the components on overall speed management. Coordinated speed management measures, again this is vital evidence, is found to reduce crash count up to 40%, as high as 40%. See the impact, see the potential, significant impact. Speed management has got significant impact on reducing severity and socioeconomic loss, and it helps us, speed management, to strike a balance between the safety and mobility. Mobility is also important, safety is also important. We cannot get mobility at the cost of safety, and especially the fatal accidents, fatal crashes or the severe injury crashes. So, a balance is to be maintained. Speed management helps us to maintain that balance. Drivers do not recognize the risk associated with speeding and therefore, often compromise safety instead of mobility, and the result is increasing number and severity of crashes. What are the measures for speed management? Speed management measures encourage compliance with both advisory speed. Suppose you have designed a roadway for 80 km/h, right, and accordingly there is a speed limit, right. Accordingly there is a speed limits, that what is the posted speed limit. And also it could be, so in some situation the road is passing through urbanized section or semi-urban development or passing through school zone, and you have a statutory speed limit, which is generally established by the state or the local authorities or the local police, right. So, speed management measures encourage compliance with both advisory speed and statutory speed limits, if any, and in most cases a combination of measures are required to create solutions which is appropriate to the needs of the location. Given a location, what are the problems, what are the characteristics, and you need a combination of measures. Which are the key measures? Speed zones and speed limits, engineering treatments, physical changes, what you do, engineering treatments, enforcement, very important. Anything you do, if you do not enforce, it will fail. Education, also there are other measures. Let us discuss very briefly about each of these aspects. First, speed zoning and speed limits. How the speed zoning and speed limits are done? One side is based on classification of roads. We all know the functional classification. Different categories of road have different functions in terms of providing accessibility and in terms of providing the mobility. If you take clearly the national and state highways, maximum, the primary thing is the mobility, not the accessibility. It is the mobility. So, obviously, my expectation or requirement of speed will be higher. As compared to that, major district road, other district road, or go to a village road, no more mobility. It is basically the accessibility. So, as per the functions, we know what speed grouping is necessary. So, we can do speed zonings as per the classification of the road. Similarly, go to urban area, expressways or urban arterials and local streets do not have the same accessibility and mobility functions. So, once I am doing grouping, zoning, I will obviously try to show that my arterials have a different speed environment and my local streets will have another speed environment. So, based on the classification of road. Second, based on the terrain, what we are getting in plain terrain, in mountainous or hilly terrain, I do not even expect the same design speed. So, my even the whatever way you say the posted speed limits, also the speed expectation should not be the same. So, as per the terrain I can decide. So, this is the hilly region, this is the plain region. So, different classifications of terrains, according to terrain the speed may be decided. Third, based on the land use. Based on the land use, rural area, urban area, yes, according to that also we can decide the speed, because the overall road environment is expected to be different in urban and rural areas. So, based on the land use, that means surrounding environment, whether it is in urban built up area or passing through rural and open area, the speed depends on that land use also. In fact, the Ministry of Road Transport and Highways MORTH tells the speed maximum speed limit for rural areas 100 to 120 km per hour and urban speed limit 70 km per hour. That is the maximum. It does not mean that every local context that has to be the maximum. Maybe we can consider them as the limiting value under most favorable condition. Yes, it could be, but if the condition is not favorable, then this should not be there. We should have a lower speed limit. So, wherever things are not favorable, we should not have this high speed limits. You have favorable conditions or favorable infrastructure, environment, everything, you can have a high speed or higher speed values. Location specific speed zones. This is another way of doing the speed zoning. Location specific. My highway is passing through, it is a national highway, it is in plain terrain, but that does not mean throughout the length of the national highway or a stretch of 100, 200, 300 kilometer passing through a state, I will be able to maintain the same speed. We may have to restrict the speed, bring down the speed limit as per the location specific requirement. For example, road with mix of motorized and unprotected vulnerable user, market area, urban, semi-urban development, lot of movement of pedestrians, bicyclists, school zone, reduces 30 km/h. Human injury tolerance criteria. You know that if a person is hit, driver may make error, and because the pedestrians are unprotected, bicyclists are unprotected, so crash might happen. So, I am bringing down the speed, the crash chance is there, high chance is there for crashes. I am bringing down the chances of fatality and severe injury, 30 km/h. You have seen that, I have shown you the figure, earlier also I have shown you. Here, if you are 30 km/h, your chances of fatality risk will be only about 10% in the scale of 0 to 100. So, make it 30. Then roads with uncontrolled access, side impact, uncontrolled intersection where we have a crash history and such kind of crashes have occurred, bring down, bring it to 50 km/h, again based on scientific evidences, and I am saying it based on injury minimization criteria. Then undivided road, head on collision may happen, 70 km/h should be the speed limit. So, that means these are 30, 50, 70. Focus is not the road, more on the road environment, vulnerable road user, the crash history and the scientific evidences, pedestrian vehicle, side impact, head on collision. What we want to minimize the injury, injury minimization criteria or human injury tolerance criteria, 30, 50, 70. Generally, we would say 80 and above you can go, but you should only forego for those sections where you have controlled access facility, completely access control with a physical median separation, no chance of head on collision, no question of unprotected pedestrians and vulnerable users, segregation of slow moving vehicle, development of or provision of the service roads wherever the land use and things demand so, to take away the slow moving vehicles, slow moving traffic, non motorized traffic out of the main carriageway, complete access control, facilities for crossing. There, if the road engineering, if the road has been designed and can support, if the vehicles are favorable, you have to think also, you cannot use non-standard vehicles and the vehicles where the maximum travel speed is 40 km/h and you cannot allow them to travel without any lane discipline. Lane usage must be defined. With all such conditions, you go for 80 and above, go for higher speed limits. You have to also think that speed limit, road is important, vehicle type is important, lane usage is important, roadside is important, and most important thing in the context of safe system approach is the human injury tolerance criteria for different types of crashes, right. We cannot afford to accept fatality and serious injury. Speed limit in transition zone for roads where the road function transitions happen. Transition zones are also required if the speed of the facility needs to be restricted locally. That means 80, you cannot make it suddenly 40. You need a transition from 80 to 40. Directly 40 kilometer speed change cannot happen. So, that is what we have said. So, if you have to 80 to 40, probably you need somewhere in between also a 60 limit. So, that the gradual speed change happen. And here speed zoning, when a highway passing through a built up area, our Indian Roads Congress guideline give this example. Suppose it is 60 kilometer and you the road is passing through village. So, it is not that within the village, suppose if you want heavy vehicles 20 kilometers, right, or all other vehicle, let us consider 25 kilometer, then it cannot come from 60 to 25 suddenly. You need zone 1, zone 2, zone 3, zone 4, different areas, different distance. So, I should start from maybe zone 4 could have 60, but the moment the road enters say 62, I am making 50, and then enters to zone 2, it is 40, 40 to 30, and then you make it 25 gradually. So, there are provisions, there are manuals, guidelines which tells this thing, the transition should happen smoothly, not all on a sudden 80 to 40. Setting of speed limit, the 4 basic principles, I am not discussing in detail, but 4 basic principles. One is road safety principle, setting up speed limit to minimize the risk of fatal and injury crashes to all road users. This is basically the human injury tolerance criteria. Then second, community well-being principle, suitable for the setting speeds limits on these local roads, because your fundamental then is basically community well-being. Third, road network efficiency principle, what I said, the function of the road, highway to district road to village road or expressway, urban expressway to the arterials to even down the line local streets. So, these are important for setting speed limits in accordance with the function of the road and infrastructure standards. As per the infrastructure standards and functions, set up the speed. Road user expectations principle, setting speed limits to be consistent with the road environment, characteristics and function of the road. I cannot have an environment which is encouraging people to travel at a higher speed, because the surface condition is very good maybe. So, geometry is very good, but I know that the road environment is contradicting. So, it is important that the function, road user expectation, community well-being and the road safety or the human injury tolerance criteria, some kind of harmony or some kind of compatibility, consistency is important. Because you do something which will encourage the drivers to travel at higher speed, and you are saying no, I do not want, I do not want. So, if you do not want, your infrastructure should not raise the expectation of the road user, that is also a point. Next, these were all about so far speed zonings and speed limits. Now, quickly engineering treatments, you have to do something, right, not setting the speed limit alone will work. It includes techniques to control traffic flow and speed, does not deal with the road design aspect. That means, I am not deciding the design speed or curve design consideration or camber super elevation consideration, no. Mainly these engineering treatments are for 2 purposes. One is treatments for slowing down, then using kind of traffic calming measures, right. I want a vehicle to come reduce the speed, as I was telling, if the speed is not, high speed is not desirable, a low speed is desirable, then my infrastructure should also help me to achieve that. Not that the road will be 2 and I will expect only a sign will do the work, it will not be possible. Second engineering treatment is required for separation of vulnerable road users. Footpaths, your pedestrian underpass, pedestrian overpass or foot over bridge, any kinds of infrastructure facilities you create for separation of vulnerable road user from the mainstream high speed motorized traffic. Those are engineering treatments. So, engineering treatments are aimed to achieve these two things, one for treatments for slowing down or doing traffic calming, the other is treatment for separation of vulnerable road user. Next, enforcement, very very important as a part of speed management. Whatever is your speed limit, whatever you do, there will be engineering treatment, there will be limitation, and nothing will give you result unless you have enforcement. That has to be there. People should be afraid, if I violate, I will be caught and I will be punished. That is also important. So, enforcement is an effective mechanism to administer penalties for offending vehicle. It acts as a deterrence, and some tools are, for example, these are all part of speed management, the use of red light cameras, speed cameras, interceptor vehicle, proper penalties and fines. You fine, but fine something which has got no impact. So, so small a value, it is not at all a deterrence. That is also not desirable, because my objective is not to collect money, but to create a deterrence. So, the penalty must be effective enough to create that deterrence. Education and awareness also part of the overall speed management. I need to educate drivers. Driver training is again very important. Before licensing, train the driver, give them required knowledge, give them required skill, and also since countries like India, our overall awareness of road user awareness is low, we may use different tools. So, for example, social media, changing public perception, compliance incentive, community based program, training and licensing, all the things may be useful. Then there are other measures which may include maybe psychological measures. The physical measures is something, but here we are trying to use psychological measures to increase the cognitive burden and then change the behavior. So, psychological measures generally produce smaller speed reduction, but sometimes they are more acceptable to drivers, and yes, that small reduction also may be quite useful. Example may be presence of trees or overgrowth of the roadside and drivers generally, or maybe rough road surface. Road surface is not so proper. I mean, there are other counter arguments could be there and other things, but trying to say that psychological measures influence the behavior, not through physical measures, but through psychological measures. There could be better examples also. I am sure there will be better examples. Intelligent speed adoption, a system which ensures that the vehicle speed does not exceed a safe or legally enforced speed. There are two kinds of system which are possible: active system, passive system. Passive systems are generally driver advisory system and display visual and audio, basically telling driver you are traveling at a higher speed, you are exceeding the speed limit, safe speed limit. You are not controlling, you are only repeatedly sending message, sending alarms, all those. Active systems actually intervene also. So, it intervene and correct the speed of the vehicles to conform with the speed limit. Use of speed governors, equipment generally used on vehicle fleets to limit the speed to a maximum specified value. For example, the commercial vehicle speed limiting it to 80 km per hour, they cannot travel more than that. Buses, public buses, school vehicles, very effective to use speed governors. Then last but not the least, other measures may also include speed management by employers. That means public service drivers and truck drivers are usually under pressure to meet daily target, resulting in speeding and excessive driving. They have to do the delivery on time. The food delivery system is again a concern. Sometimes the evidences are not so encouraging, right. Also the travel agencies, their drivers, you do not know how long they are driving. You wanted a vehicle came and a driver came with that, but you never know how long the vehicle driver has been working continuously. Or commercial vehicle drivers, they will be given a target that you have to reach the destination by this time. There are reasons, maybe grocery, maybe the vegetables and the perishable products they are carrying. So, if they cannot reach in the mark to the destination by time, then they cannot that day the vegetables and perishable goods cannot go to market. So, therefore, so here the setting clear rules on maximum permissible driving hours is very important, which is actually the system is very good in developed world, and unfortunately in nearly all the LMICs this is very weak. You have no control on how long a driver is driving, how long continuously it is driving, and maybe whole night the driver is driving, and then next day also he is doing the duty. So, setting clear rules on maximum permissible driving hours and distance and observance of speed limit by the employer encourage employee compliance. So, that also the rules regulations framework is very important. So, altogether what we discussed here about the speed management. Why first focus on speeding out of all, number of points I said which are very important. Then briefly what are the factors influencing speed, then what is really speed management, what all it includes, then the measures for speed management, the speed zoning and speed limits, the different basis for speed zoning and setting speed limits, engineering treatment, enforcement, education, and also the other measures. So, with this I complete this lecture, and also with this I complete this module and this course as well. Thank you so much for your patience.